Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BYU Library Family History webinar series. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Megan Smith, and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is on February 25th with Catherine Grant. She will be giving a presentation called Using Family Search's Tree Integrity Features. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook account. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Joe Everett, who will be talking about a case study using German immigrants in American church records. Eve Skorup was unable to present at this time, but we plan to schedule her at a future date. Today, Joe Everett will be presenting in her place on the same topic. Before we begin, here's a little bit about our speaker. Joe Everett is the Senior Librarian for Family History, Local History, and Microforms at the Brigham Young University Harold B. Lee Library, and the producer of BYU Library's Family History webinars. He has over 30 years combined experience at BYU, the Family Search Library, and Ancestry.com. Joe manages the family and local history collections and patron services of the BYU Library and serves as faculty liaison to instructors in BYU's Family History undergraduate degree program. At Family Search, Joe is a library program manager providing services for the 5,000 plus Family Search centers. Previously at Family Search, he headed the International Reference Floor at the Family Search Library and worked for several years as a technical services librarian, cataloging Slavic and Germanic records. At Ancestry.com, he worked in content acquisitions and content production and project management, putting genealogical databases online, including the Hamburg passenger lists. Joe earned a degree in Russian language and in family history genealogy with a Germanic emphasis from Brigham Young University and a Master of Library Science from Emporia State University. He has been a member and officer in various library and genealogical associations. An accredited genealogist in German and Russian Empire research, he has lectured and published articles on family history research, historical geography, and migration. Joe, if you're ready, we'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Well, guten Tag and willkommen, everyone, to this presentation. We're going to be actually looking at multiple case studies using the German Immigrants in American Church Records project. We have had some prior webinars on this topic, which I would invite you to check out in our webinar library. So this will be adding to the information that's already been provided, but I will review some information about the project before I get into the case studies. The creator and editor-in-chief of the German Immigrants in American Church Records books is Dr. Roger P. Meinert, an emeritus professor of Brigham Young University. This is Dr. Meinert at his home showing one of the volumes of this series. These books are a significant reference resource for German genealogy, consisting of the names and places of birth for German immigrants extracted from church records in the United States. I have been the associate editor for this project since about 2019. Now, before I get into more about the project and the case studies, I want to just review a bit about German migration to the United States and to kind of set the stage for why these reference books are important. So German immigrants actually comprise the largest immigrant group in the U.S. About 43 million Americans claim German ancestry, and that's more than any other ancestry group. Note that this only represents those who claim German as a primary ancestry. Millions more Americans have at least one German ancestor, but identify more with a different ancestry, or they chose not to report their ancestry in the census. Their German immigrant ancestors might be further back, and so they might not associate their German heritage as much. Nevertheless, a large percentage of Americans have German heritage. And this map shows the distribution of people claiming ancestry in the US according to the Census Bureau. You can see that there are people with German roots in every corner of the country, while the highest concentration live in the Midwest. The first German immigrants to the United States, before it was even the United States, arrived in 1607 in Jamestown with English colonists. The largest period of German immigration was during the late 1800s. Nearly 6 million German immigrants came between 1820 and 1920. The majority of Germans settled in rural areas and made their living in agriculture. German immigrants often had their own churches and schools where they spoke and wrote in German. This was especially true among Lutherans and other Protestant faiths. By the 20th century, German Americans became more assimilated, speaking and writing in English. German research requires pinpointing the specific town of origin. This is because most German records are not yet indexed, even when they are online, which is still very hit and miss. There's also no equivalent in Germany to the US federal censuses. That is, there's no national record collection that is fully intact and indexed, listing all the residents for a given time period, let alone one that spans different decades like the US Census does. So there's no way you can just search for a name to find out where someone was in Germany as you can in the US and some other countries. And what's more, where they lived historically may not even be Germany any longer, as in this example. Even if you manage to find someone in an index, you cannot be certain it's the right person without further context due to common personal names. Knowing the specific place they came from helps in determining whether you are tracing the right person. To find the place of origin, you must first use records in the United States to determine the specific German town before you can begin researching in German records. Unfortunately, as shown in this example of World War I draft cards, oftentimes US records are not all that helpful. Most records, particularly before the 20th century, do not provide specific information about the ancestral hometown. It is common to see only the name of a region of Germany, such as Bavaria, or even less helpful, Prussia, or merely Germany. Combine that with a common names like Johann, Brown, and there's no way you can hope to trace them. Dr. Meinert's decades of research tracing German immigrant origins has given him a lot of insight into what records provide the best information about place of origin. According to his research, many of the U.S. records that are most commonly referred to for finding immigrant origins, such as naturalization records and passenger lists, have only at best a 20% probability of providing the specific place of origin. County genealogies and military records have a bit higher chance of providing this information. But look at church records. An estimated 60 to 70% of local church vital records can give the specific town of origin, according to Dr. Meinert's research. Many people searching for their German ancestors are not aware of this. If they knew, more people would be seeking to search in church records. Most Protestant parishes in the US have not copied their records in any medium. And that is one of the big reasons why there is such a lack of awareness of these as an important resource for tracing immigrant origins. People just haven't been able to find them as being as accessible as some of those other record types. While some church records have been microfilmed and subsequently digitized by Family Search or Ancestry, and in some cases indexed, most have not been. The genealogy companies tend to focus on more easily accessible records such as federal censuses, passenger lists, state vital records, etc. Church records are harder to obtain because, for the most part, neither originals nor copies have been gathered into centralized repositories. There are some exceptions, such as the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, which has made microfilm copies of records from hundreds of churches across dozens of U.S. states. Many of those more recently digitized by Ancestry.com, but mostly the records have remained with the local churches or in small local church repositories. To obtain them requires going to each one by one to request access. Often the current pastor or local church archives records custodian is not even aware of the old parish registers that they have in their collection. Dr. Meinert has had many disappointing visits to such repositories, asking for permission to make copies of their records for indexing purposes, only to discover that they don't know what they have. In some cases, the old churches no longer exist, having been taken over by another congregation, sometimes even a different Protestant denomination. The records may have been lost or changed hands to the point that no one knows where they are. Some have wound up in the personal possession of the family of the original pastor. Tracking down these records has been one of the major efforts of the German Immigrants in American Church Records project, at least as important, if not more so, than the work of transcription. Now, here you can see an example of why these records can be so valuable. This is a birth or baptism record from Wisconsin, an evangelical Lutheran parish there. And you can see underlined in green the German hometowns of the parents of these children are identified. This is an example of confirmation records from a parish in Indiana from 1855, again, providing the birthplaces of the father, at least here. Well, excuse me, of the child being confirmed. This is a marriage record in a Lutheran parish showing the hometowns of the parties in the marriage, the bride and the groom. Church membership lists may also give the birthplace of immigrants, members of the congregation, as in this example. Death and burial records can also include the birth date and place, as well as other information. This is a death record from Wisconsin in 1925 that is approximately 275 words long, and it contains a bunch of rich information about the person's life, including their birth, names of their parents, place in Germany, and specifically that they were born in addition to other information. So those are just a few examples of the kind of records. Again, these are not records from Germany. These are records from the United States that are written in German primarily by the German immigrants. The German Immigrants in American Church Records project was begun by Dr. Meinert at Brigham Young University professor in 2004 as an experiential learning project for students that were learning about German genealogical research and also German language. These are the students that are currently working on the project, including Megan, who is our webinar host. Dr. Meinert saw the tremendous value of these German American church records and realizing their general lack of accessibility and the lack of awareness of them, dreamed of locating as many of these records as possible and transcribing them. Excuse me. After years of working as a freelance genealogy researcher while obtaining his PhD, he obtained a position on the Brigham Young University faculty teaching family history. And he saw an opportunity to realize this dream with the help of university resources and students for whom this would become an experiential learning project. Dr. Meinert taught German paleography, or Old Handwriting, and research methodology, integrating the German Immigrants in American Church Records project as part of the curriculum. The students learn valuable skills in reading the Old German handwriting and determining the correct location, spelling, and historical jurisdiction of the ancestral places of origin. They also develop project management and other skills and have the opportunity to be published as co-authors of the books that they contribute to. Meanwhile, researchers benefit from a resource that may be the key to connecting their immigrant ancestor to their German hometown. This is a couple of pictures of students at work extracting records. We used to do this from microfilm copies. Now, for the most part, things have been digitized. Unless in cases where they haven't been, Dr. Meinert will travel to different states and visit the local churches or archives, religious archives there, and take digital images with his own phone or other camera and bring those back for extraction by the students. On the right is a picture of one of the many indexing parties, as we call them, to prepare the name index in the back of each volume prior to publication. We have 46 volumes of this series thus far, and the work continues. You can see here the states that are covered by each of the volumes so far. And here is a map showing the distribution of these volumes by state. And here you get a sneak peek that our next upcoming volume, 47, will be for the state of Pennsylvania. And we expect to have multiple volumes published for Pennsylvania in the coming years. The information in the German Immigrants in American Church Records books, which, by the way, we nicknamed GIACR for short. That's the acronym GIACR. This is the organization. So within each volume, there's immigrant information organized by town and by parish, with source information indicating where the copies of the originals were obtained. The books don't include the actual church record images, but just abstracts of the information that was found on those original records. The abstracts include the name and birthplace of the immigrant, along with information insofar as it is available, such as marriage and death, or burial information, spouses' names, parents' names, etc. Only persons who are clearly identifiable as immigrants from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and the former Austrian states of Bohemia and Moravia are included in the scope of the project. Each volume includes a name index at the back, and there are also some multi-volume indexes for some volumes. You can also obtain a copy of the index to all of the volumes, which I'll tell you about later how you can obtain that. All right, here's an example of an abstract. This is an example that contains really rich detail. Most entries aren't quite so detailed as this. In fact, this is a mock entry just to show kind of the ultimate example of what an abstract might contain. So you have the immigrant's name, birthplace with, town, county, and province, birth date, in this case, calculated from their age at death, their baptism location, the parents' names, marriage location, name of the first wife, and then also information about a second marriage, the place of death and date of death, age at death, burial location, and date, the date immigrated, other names that he was known by, military or immigration information, and then at the end, the source reference. So again, this is a ultimate example. Sample entries of actual entries are more typically like this, with less comprehensive information. But by and large, containing the most critical information, which is the place of origin, or the birthplace of the immigrant and the birth date. Now, the research method is to begin by searching to find where in the US the person resided. And the US censuses can be most helpful for this. Once you know the state that the person resided in, you'll want to gather any other context about the family that you can, including some spelling variations, names of other family members, what religion they were, etc. The more context you have about the immigrant from other sources, including family records, the better. Then you can check the GIACR volumes for the state where they lived, checking the indexes in the back, and also looking in the table of contents for parishes where they lived, and browsing the entries if you can't spot them in the index. Being mindful always of spelling variations. Be aware that the immigrant may have also attended church in a neighboring location, and also that close relatives of the immigrant might have settled in the same place or in neighboring places or counties. So you'll want to check around, because if you don't find your specific immigrant, you might find his brother or sister or his child, and that might give that vital clue of the place of origin. When you find an immigrant, make note of all the information in the abstract and check for other entries of the same immigrant or of other family members. It's always best to look up the images of the original church records to verify the transcription and check for other information that may not be included in the abstract. If you look at the heading at the beginning of a parish listed in GIACR, then it will give you the U.S. place name, county, and state, as well as the source, whether it was a family search microfilm number or an ancestry.com reference that the original came from. In some cases, of course, you are not going to be able to go back to the original unless you travel to that state and go to that local church or the local church archive that the records were obtained from by Dr. Meinert. So we try to, at least in the abstracts, provide the information that you need to trace the immigrant back. And if you can access the original U.S. church record, then do so. All right. So here is an example of using the U.S. Census to determine the U.S. place of residence of a German immigrant. So here we have William Mans. And we find him living in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1880. You want to, again, gather all the context you can about the immigrant and their family, including names, spelling variations, names of other family members, religion, occupation, event dates, and places, etc. It's good to find the immigrant and their family in all the U.S. Census records, for example. The more context you have, the more likely you'll be to recognize and find the family in German church records in the United States and eventually in Germany. So here we have, for example, another census year for William Mans. And the residence might change over time in the US. And so you may be looking in multiple places for multiple volumes of the GIACR books to look for possible entries for that person or other family members. So once you know the state where they lived, you can check the volumes that include that state. There are 2 volumes of GIACR for Cincinnati, Ohio, just the city of Cincinnati alone, where William Mans was living, according to those census records. And in the index, we can see the index to one of these Cincinnati volumes, we can see William Manns with his German given name spelling of Wilhelm. Here we also see some other Manns, including a Marie Manns with the maiden name Fieber on the same page. Just from this index entry, we can see that this is probably his wife, whom we already know from the censuses to be named Mary, which in German would be Marie. Since there are 2 volumes for Cincinnati, it'd be a good idea to check for the Manns as well as Marie's maiden name Fieber in the other volume. And if the censuses or other U.S. records show the family living anywhere else, then you'll want to consult the other volumes for those places as well. If you don't find an immigrant in the index, it might be due to a spelling variation. As an alternative to looking up a name in the index, you can look up the location and parish where they were living in the table of contents, and then browse all the entries for that parish. This is an example from the Indiana volume. Again, Dr. Meinert has a digital library of his collected works, which you can obtain, which has a master table of contents listing all of the parishes for the full set. The collected works also includes all the indexes for the volumes that have been published to date. So you can check for your family names to see which volumes might be of use to you before you purchase them, or check for them in a library. Okay. With the help of the Cincinnati Index to volume 32, we can find the entry for Wilhelm Manns. When you find an immigrant, make note of all the information in the abstract. Here we learn that all important information that he was born in Romershausen, Hessen-Nassau. His birth date is also given. This information comes from his burial record in the St. Matthias German Evangelical Church in Ohio. Again, it's good to pay attention to information about other family members. As the index hinted, Marie Manns' maiden name Fieber is indeed his wife. Note that her name is not in bold because there is nothing in the records to indicate that she was an immigrant. In fact, from the prior census research, we know that she was born in Ohio. It may be that her parents were the immigrants. And further research on the Fieber family could lead to a GIACR entry for them in a different place, as they are not found in the Cincinnati volumes. Look for a heading at the beginning of the parish list giving information about the source. Sometimes you have to go back many pages to find this heading, as the number of immigrants may be large. It's always best to look up the images of the original church records to verify the transcription and check for other information that may not be included in the abstract. This family search microfilm is not indexed, but you can browse the digital images online to find the burial entry for William Manns. So here it is. After you found an immigrant in GIACR, here are the research methods to trace the immigrant back to German records in Germany itself. You'll want to, and I'll walk you through these steps here in just a moment. You're going to want to use gazetteers such as Meyer's Gazetteer for Germany, or Genteam for Austria, to determine the location of the parish, which might be different from the birthplace. And then search for the original records of that parish wherever they might be found. And then once you find where records exist, then you're going to want to look for the birth record by date. And if not found, you're going to want to check for some years before or some years after, in case there is a date discrepancy. Sometimes birth dates given in US records are wrong. Maybe the year is off by a bit, or maybe you just have an approximate date of birth and not a specific birth date. And once you find the birth record in German records, then you can look for births of siblings and other records of the family in that parish, such as the parents' marriage record, marriage and death records of other family members, and so on. All right, so taking this example of Wilhelm Manns, we look up Romershausen in the Myers-Orts Gazetteer online and see that it did indeed have its own evangelical parish. So now we can look for records of Romershausen. They might be found on Family Search, on Ancestry, on Archeon, on Matricula Online. In this case, Romershausen records are available on Archeon. This is a paid site, and to learn more about it, I would refer you to other sources. I won't have time to go in depth about how to use Archeon in this presentation. But I can search for Romershausen, find the records of that parish, select the church book that covers the right years that I need, and then browse until I get to the date of birth for Wilhelm Manz. And here we have his original birth record in this parish of Romershausen in Germany. Thanks to the German Immigrants and American Church Records books that gave me the information, that critical piece of information of Romershausen. All right, let's look at some more cases. So this is Hermann Karl Zischang, and we know this information about him from U.S. sources, that he died in Texas, that he was born in 1863. He had several children. His wife was named Marie Hannes. Now, as we look for U.S. sources for him, we ran into a lot of disappointing record sets in terms of trying to find his place of origin. This is his death certificate in Lee County, Texas, and all it says is that he was born in Germany, which is what we already knew. It does give us his father's name of August Zischang, which confirms what we found in the GIACR book, which also gave his father's name as August. His mother's name here is listed as unknown. This is his marriage record. And again, unfortunately, no information about his place of origin. Doesn't even say Germany here, as his doesn't even give birthplace information. Looking for obituaries, we find two obituaries for him. But these also don't tell us anything about where he was from specifically. The right one at least says Germany, but doesn't say specifically where. Let's see. The census won't tell us his birthplace, but it's useful for finding out the places in the U.S. that he was living. Here we find him in a different county in Texas in 1910. We also see that his wife was actually born in Germany, but they came at different times. He came in 1870. The arrival year from the census does help us find a passenger list. On the ship Frankfurt, he sailed from Bremen to New Orleans when he was 7 years old in 1860. It gives his birth date of 1863. He's traveling with a large group of people with the name Zischang. Relationships are not given. We know his father is August from his death certificate. August is listed just above him, age 39. It's most likely his father, which would make 35-year-old Magdalena listed between August and Hermann's likely mother. This is secondary information and indirect evidence of these relationships. So this passenger list helps to narrow down the place of origin, but still not specifically. It says that he and other Zischangs came from the Kingdom of Saxony, but we need more specific information than this. Unfortunately, the Bremen passenger lists for this time period have not survived, so there's no way to check the passenger manifests departing Germany to see if they have more specific information. One record that might be of help is his naturalization record. Though the 1910 census did not say anything about his naturalization, the 1920 census, pictured here, indicates he was naturalized in 1887. He would likely have been living in either Lee County at that time, as he was married there in 1885, or in Williamson County, where he was living by 1900. Ancestry and Family Search indexed naturalization databases do not include Lee or Williamson County. Family Search does have naturalization records for both counties digitized from microfilm, including declarations and petitions, which could give the birth information. There are printed indexes for both counties digitized from microfilm. Hermann Seeshang is not found in either one, though. The index to the Williamson County records does have a Peter Seeshang. Peter was listed as one of the passengers on the same ship as Hermann, and very likely is a close relative, maybe an uncle. His origin could very well be the same as Hermann's. The index gives the dates, jurisdictions, and case files for the declaration, petition, and other naturalization documents. The images of the original declarations and petitions are only available in a family history center. Unfortunately, looking at these naturalization records from the same county, we can see that they generally don't give you specific information about the place of origin. This is a person, this is not our Hermann Seeshang, but this is another person in the same county. And you can see all it says is that he was born in Prussia and that he renounces his allegiance to the Empire of Germany. So again, we're hitting a dead end when it comes to the place of origin, or that proverbial brick wall. So this is where the German immigrants and American church records can come to the rescue. In one of the volumes for Texas, we find Hermann Seeshang, son of August Seeshang, as we learned from his death certificate, and also supported by the passenger list. And we learned that the place of birth is Bautzen in the Kingdom of Saxony, which also matches information that we found from the passenger list. Looking at the original, this is the original document that the GIACR record was abstracted from. This was extracted specifically from the Seelenregister, or list of souls, which is basically like a membership record for the Christus Evangelical Lutheran Church in Hochkirch in Williamson County, Texas. A lot of these German immigrant communities in the United States had German place names. All right, now that we have the place Bautzen in Saxony, we can look it up in Meyer's Gazetteer. There's multiple places called Bautzen in Germany, but one of them is in the Kingdom of Saxony, or in German, Sachsen. We see that it did have its own Lutheran church as well as a civil registration office, according to the Meyer's Gazetteer. Now we can go try looking for records. So in this case, searching on Family Search, we find that there are Bautzen parish registers for the Lutheran Church. They're available on Family Search, but not Archeon. They were microfilmed in 2005 and later digitized. There is a historical records collection for Saxony church records, which you could go and search the index of, or you can look up Bautzen in the Family Search catalog. So looking in the catalog here, we can find the baptism records for the year of 1863, which is when Hermann Seeshang was born. And then browsing these images on Family Search, turns out this, while there is a collection of historical records on Family Search for Saxony church records, it's not fully indexed yet. I can tell that this particular item is not indexed because there is no magnifying glass next to the camera icon on this on this catalog entry. So I have to browse to it by finding 1863 and then going to the date of birth for him. And here is the Holy Grail. We have now found the original birth record, birth and baptism record for Hermann Zischeng in Bautzen in Germany. And it gives his parents' full names, Andreas August Zischeng and Maria Magdalena Schulz. Now we have the mother's maiden name. We also learned that the mother came from another place called Plotzen. So we've overcome that brick wall, traced him back to his ancestral home, and we're in business. We can trace the family back generations further in this parish on his father's side, and also go look for records of Plotzen for tracing his mother's side. All right, we have time for one more case study. This is Frederick Hansing. According to family information, he was born the 3rd of March, 1838, in Königsburg, Schaumburg-Lippe, Hanover, Germany. And that he died in 1910 in Indianapolis. And he was married to Caroline Harmoning. And these are names of his children. All right, so Königsburg, Schaumburg, Lippe, Hanover, Germany. That's very interesting. First of all, there's no place quite called Schaumburg-Lippe. There is, however, a Schaumburg-Lippe. It was a free state within the German Empire, a very small region of Germany. As you can see, its location on the left there in red, and then on the right, we see a close-up there of the map of this place. Now, there are 23 places called Königsberg or Königsburg in Germany, but none of them are located within Schaumburg-Lippe. So something's not quite right with the family information. Let's see. The nearest one is in the neighboring Kreis of Minden and Westfalen. But checking the parish registers there, he was not found. So that was not the right place. Using a surname distribution map from the surname mapping website Geogen, we see that the name Hansing is indeed found in Schaumburg-Lippe. It's the highest concentration of that surname. And we might be tempted to try to go and just search, because Schaumburg-Lippe is not a very large region of Germany, just search all the parishes there. But we see that there are scores of them. And so that would be a very labor-intensive effort. Plus, the Schaumburg-Lippe records were never microfilmed by Family Search, and as of yet have not been digitized and put online by anybody. So it's a pretty impossible task. You'd have to obtain the records by correspondence somehow. And before you embark on that, you're really going to want to narrow it down to the specific parish. Couldn't find the family in passenger lists, but there's very likely they wouldn't give the place of birth. This is a death record for Frederick Hansing, or Fred, as in the example of Zischeng before, it just says Germany. Here's his application for a marriage license to Clara Marie Hansing, who gives his birthplace again as Germany. It tells us his occupation of cabinet maker. We're going to want to hold on to that information. We also can see that he was previously married. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Okay. This is actually not his. This is another marriage to a second wife, and his first wife died, and it gives Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little bit mixed up here. I apologize. Um, this is a marriage of his son, who was born in Columbia, Indiana. Remember, our Fred Hansing died in Indianapolis. This is his son by the same name, Fred, who was born in Columbus. So that's very important information. So we're going to want to look not just in Indianapolis, but in Columbus, Indiana, for records of this family. This is Frederick's another entry of Frederick's marriage to Caroline Harmony in 1884. And then we see it is his second marriage. And we find out that his parents' names were Fred Hansing and Dorothea Schroeder. So going to Columbus, we find him in the 1870 census as a cabinet maker, which matches that marriage record we saw earlier. This is with his first wife named Mary, and a daughter who was also, but Mary and the daughter were born in Germany. So there won't be a marriage record in the US for this couple because they were born in Germany. There also won't be a birth record for Mary as she was born in Germany, the daughter. But there could be other records of Mary, the daughter, such as a confirmation record. There could be death records for Fred and the wife, Mary. This is the declaration of intent for when Fred became a citizen, and it just says Prussia. From some other research, we find some additional clues. 1880 census lists 3 more children from the first marriage. We find a marriage record that gives the maiden name of the first wife as Dolaweber. A marriage of a daughter gives the mother's maiden name as Engel Maria Dolverver. So we get some different spellings of that mother's maiden name. Looking for that name, Dolweber, which Dolweber, Dolvever, Dolverver, Dolvabor, those are all variant spellings of Dolweber, which is also found in the Schaumburg-Lippe area. So this is strong evidence that the Schaumburg-Lippe Free State is the correct place of origin. We just need to know the parish name. Frederick's 1900 census record in Indianapolis shows the son William E. from his first marriage, born in 1872. Other children listed in 1900 are from his second marriage. It gives his birth date as March 1840, which matches the 1870 census. It's a little bit different than the family information that had his birth date in 1838. So you want to keep track of those different, not only different spelling variations, but also different information about potential birthplace, so that when you get into the original church records, you can be checking from multiple places to find it. So now here's a warning. You might, as you're going along in your research, get a red herring like this. This is a Friedrich Hansing, born in a place called Schlüsselburg, which sounds a little bit like Königsberg, and it's also right next door. I mean, this is within miles of the border, just a few miles of the border with Schaumburg-Lippe, and with a mother, Dorothea, and a father of Frederick, which matches some of the information in the prior record. The mother's surname here is different, but it's possible that she could have had another marriage. Is this our Frederick Hansing? The there's not enough information to tell for sure. The birth date matches, it's March 1839, which is right in between the 1838 and family records and the 1840 and the census document. This is why another reason why we need to verify the specific place of origin from known sources in the U.S., because you might follow a red herring like this and chase the wrong family. I'll tell you now that further research did confirm that this is not the right Frederick Hansing. Turning back to Columbus, Indiana, which is where we know one of the sons was born, we find records of some of the children of Fred Hansing being born here, along with another Hansing who's also having children at the same time. These could potentially be brothers. We can try searching for records of the brother, of the supposed brother or potential brother, William Hansing. This is a census record for William Hansing, who may be the brother of Fred Hansing, showing that the mother Dora, or which is an abbreviation of Dorothea, is living with him. So if this is indeed Fred's brother, then this would be Fred's mother. These are all still just hypotheses at this point, as we don't have complete information yet. So this is a summary of what we know now. So we know that Fred Hansing was born the 3rd of March of 1838 or 1836 or 1840, probably in Schaumburg-Lippe, but we don't have a specific town. He had a middle name of John or Johann. His father was named Frederick as well, or Friedrich. His mother was named Dorothea Schroeder or Schrader, which would be likely Schröder in German. We don't know if that's her maiden name or if that's a prior married name. He had a first wife, Angel Maria, and these are different spelling variations, likely originally Dollweber, who was born about 1840, also born in Germany. And then he had a daughter, Mary or Maria, who was born about 1865 in Germany. We have a potential brother, William or Wilhelm, with the same parents' names, and likely his mother, if that's his brother, then his mother, Dorothy or Dora Hansing, living with William in the 1880 census at age 65. Now, we've exhausted everything we could do in U.S. traditional sources. Let's see what GIACR can help us with. Knowing that he was born in Columbus, Indiana, we can look in the Indiana volume for GIACR, and looking in the table of contents, we see that we have Columbus. There's 3 parishes there. Browsing through the entries, we find this entry for Angel Maria Dorothea Hansing, or Housing, actually. And here's where there's actually a misspelling, and that it's GIACR isn't always perfect. We strive for high accuracy, and I would say it's 99.9% accurate, but here's a case where the letter N was confused for a letter U, and hence it wasn't found in the index. But based on the context we've gathered so far, we know that Engel, spelled A-N-G-E-L, or angel, which in German is E-N-G-E-L, or Engel, Maria was the name of the first wife of Frederick, and that they had a daughter who was named Mary or Maria, and could very well have been named after her mother and also be named Angel Maria. This is showing that she is the daughter of Friedrich Hansing, that she was born in 1865, which matches the approximate year of birth of that first child from the census that we found. And we see that all important information that she was born in Hushagen. We also find in this same GIACR book, in the same parish, a Dorothea, surname Hansing. We don't know her maiden name, so that's why it has the two dashes. But if you look later in the entry toward the end there, it says M period, meaning married, someone named, again, the typo of housing, which we believe is Hansing. This is another reason to go to the original. We can go to the original and see that it is indeed Hansing. This is the confirmation record for the daughter, Engel Maria Dorothea Hansing, who was born in Germany in Hushagen, 24th of April, 1865. And then the record for Dorothea, which we believe is the mother, is a death record. And here we see more information than what we can provide in the GIACR book. We can see that she was a widow named Dorothea Hansing, abbreviated DOR period. It gives her birth date, 19th of December, 1814, which is really close to the estimated birth date from the census, which based on her age was about 1815. She was born in Ludersfeld in Schaumburg-Lippe, so a parish not far from Hushagen, as we will note we will see in a moment. And it says here that since 1873, she's been living here with her son, Wilhelm. And then it lists survivors, and it says the survivors of her after she died are her sons, William and Friedrich. WM stands for William, and Friedrich is abbreviated FRIEDR period. So our hypothesis earlier that Wilhelm or William might be the brother of Frederick is confirmed. From here, we can go to Myers-Orts, look up Hushagen, see that it did not have, let's see, it had its own civil registration office. But it did not have its own parish church. We can see also in the Myers Gazetteer database that the nearest place with a church is Lauenhagen. And we can see here on a map that Hushagen is just down the road from Lauenhagen. So now we need to know, we know that we need to look for parish church records from Lauenhagen. I mentioned previously that the Schaumburg-Lippe Free State records haven't been digitized and put online by anybody yet. I was able to contact a researcher, though, who was able to access these church records and extract the information for me. So here is an extract of the original birth record of our Frederick Hansing, who interestingly is originally named Friedrich Wilhelm Hansing. We also find his marriage record to Engel Maria Sophia Dollweber, as well as a confirmation for Friedrich Wilhelm Hansing, and that he was born on the 3rd of March, 1840. So the first record here is actually the birth of the daughter, Engel Maria Sophie Hansing, daughter of Frederick Hansing and Engel Maria Dollweber. And then the second one here is the marriage of Frederick to Engel Maria. And then the third is the confirmation record for Frederick Wilhelm Hansing. We can't find the original birth record of Frederick because there's a gap in these records. The originals are missing for the births, but we do have his confirmation record as well as his brother's confirmation record. Interestingly, his brother was given the exact same name, Friedrich Wilhelm Hansing. It was a very common practice in Germany to have multiple children with the same name. And then one would go by one of the names. So in this case, Frederick went by, his first name Friedrich, and then his brother Wilhelm went by his second name. All right. So there you have three case study examples. The GIACR books are available from Family Roots Publishing. For purchase. You can also check your library listings to see if your library has these volumes in their collection. If they don't, you might request that your library obtain a copy of them, especially if you have a lot of people doing German research in the area where you live. Some genealogical societies have also obtained copies of these as well. Note that all royalties for the sale of these books goes back to funding the project and primarily funding student wages for students working on the project. I mentioned before that you can obtain Roger Meinert's collected works. It's just a flash drive that has a bunch of articles by him, as well as the full table of contents of the GIACR books and the indexes to all of the volumes. So you can at least find out which volume that you might want to consult based on the index. You can just look up GRT publications for information about that. All right. That's all I have. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this presentation. I hope it's given you some ideas for your German research, and I hope that you will check out this important reference work to aid you in your research if you have any ancestors from those U.S. states that have been covered thus far. Okay, with that, we'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Joe. There are no questions in the chat. We'll give people a few seconds to submit those if they have them. But I was going to ask, for the states that are not yet completed in the GIACR project, do you think that all of them will be completed eventually?
I don't think that the project will go to every U.S. state that had Germans, but rather it will keep focused on those states that had a high number of German immigrants. It all really depends on where there are German immigrants who settled into communities where they were still preserving their traditions, including keeping church records in this manner, including that birthplace information. And the focus is primarily on Protestants, because the Protestants, whether they be Lutheran or Reformed, are typically meeting together and having church together with other Germans and keeping their records in this way. Catholics generally were more assimilated and would go to church with other Catholics from, say, Poland or Ireland in many cases, and oftentimes did not include place of origin in their records. There are, of course, exceptions to that, but that's why you'll primarily see Protestants. So Pennsylvania will keep us busy for some time. We might return back to some of the states that we've extracted before if more records become available for those other states. But yeah, we'll probably mostly be staying in Midwest states and some of those states of like the early colonies where there were high numbers of German immigrants.
Great, thank you so much. I think as I've worked on GIACR, I've been impressed how often and how detailed these records are that include German immigrants, and it's amazing how helpful this resource is to help with German American family history research. So thank you so much for your webinar, Joe. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope that you will join us for our next webinar on February 25th with Catherine Grant about using Family Search's tree integrity features. A recording of this webinar will be made available by next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fh_webinars@byu.edu or follow us on Facebook. Thank you and have a wonderful week.